for the intro.
The butt one is the famous one. If you literally see the circumference of his asshole, you would have thought a Louisville Slugger got shoved in there.
Dude, what?
If you zoom it in, he doesn't have anything. It's just a giant sack. Yeah, big things coming, blessed. Fuck you. A PSA from the Messiah of old school. Stop sending dick pics.
To minors.
To minors. Well, stop sending dick pics, period. No girl really wants to see that.
Do accents. Don't do face paint.
Jump sucker.
Yeah!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Conversations. I'm Noel DiMaggio, along with Big Frank, our social media coordinator, and sitting with us today is Shawn Donavan. Shawn, thank you for...
Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you, man.
I don't know if it's really an honor.
Oh no, it's an honor.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed watching you in a bunch of matches, actually. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
come on, it's a great time.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys having me.
Absolutely.
So what are we talking about?
So let's start at the beginning. What got you hooked on pro wrestling? What was the moment that got you hooked on it?
It's weird. I remember this pretty vividly. So I was watching, my grandfather was a huge fan of watching sports and wrestling. You know, we're from Italy with his family, raising a family. Who does everybody love in the 70s and 80s? Fucking Bruno Sammartino, that's it. Hooked on MSG Network. I remember I was probably like 4 or 5, and I remember he was watching, I don't remember exactly who it is, but I remember a match between, I can't remember the opponent, but I remember Baron Miguel Cicluna. And just a very up-and-coming guy, but it was kind of like a mid-card guy. And I playing my toys, I looked up and I just saw it. And I was just drawn. I don't know what it was. And then as I got into it as I watched it, I got more into the the characters, the pageantry, the over-the-top of it, but just the way that the guys commanded a crowd. Like, snap a finger, they go from loving you to hating you, and that was it. But for some reason, I was always drawn to the villains, hence is why I'm really an asshole in real life. But that's what really got me drawn in, and that's where it all started. And I growing up in the Northeast, we didn't get a lot of NWA or WCW. It was all WWF. So when TBS and TNT came around and it switched to WCW, you started getting more of that. And then 94, 95, when I was going to wrestling conventions, and then all of a sudden, here it is, MSG Network. I'm hearing of ECW, and you turn this on, it's this rebel organization, and that's really what exploded it for me.
So you were an ECW fan back in the day?
Yeah, huge. It was a different product. Everybody hears the stories, and you hear on podcasts that 93 to 96 era of WWE was just one of it was one of the worst times, unfortunately. And then you see a rebel product like this, and you see guys like Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko doing some of the craziest technical wrestling you've ever seen, just lighting up crowds. And then you have guys like Sandman and Tommy Dreamer and all these, just something brand new. It was fresh. You get hooked on it. But even before then, I always knew I wanted to get into wrestling. But that was really what drew me in. It was just the uniqueness of every character. Everybody was special.
As you were growing up, were you was this the dream all along?
Yeah, I would say probably from the time I was about 10 years old, I said I wanted to do this. I was like a lot of kids that said, I'm not going to college. I want to go to wrestling school, and that was shut down very quickly. So,
did you start training at all, like weightlifting, anything like that?
I tried my hand at. I was pretty decent at basketball, and I was pretty decent at just playing at the park. But when it came to like team sports, I wasn't necessarily very good. I tried my hand at football and realized very quickly I wanted to be a wide receiver, but I have 2 left hands, and I can't catch a football to save my life. So, being the fat kid, I was told, hey, you could be a defensive back or a linebacker. So I played 2 there. I figured wanting to get into pro wrestling, everybody wants to become an amateur wrestler. I spent 2 years of junior varsity, never won a match. So of course I'm already discouraged at that point. So I figure my pro wrestling career is going to get started in the right way. So But yeah, I tried my hand at sports and doing that. I was always the fat overweight kid in school. I tried weightlifting, but I just never got into it. I was very discouraged. I had very low self-esteem as a kid because of that. So I just kind of faded away into, obscurity at the nerds table, and instead sitting there trying to figure out how fast we can time a French fry, the oil bleeding into a napkin. So yeah.
Do you remember the time?
No, not at all. I just remember the horrible kitchen food. It was just terrible.
You look like you were a fighter during school, though. Like, you were scrapping. Let's be real.
I wasn't scrappy. I was a troublemaker, and I think a lot of it came because of the fact that I was bullied a lot as a kid. So sometimes you just got to fight back. I always equate it to you back a dog into a corner. What's it going to do? It's going to bite at some point. And finally, I had enough. And my senior year, I think I had like 15, 20 detentions. I got suspended 2 or 3 times. Don't know how the hell I graduated, but yeah, my worst was shoving a kid down a flight of stairs because he bullied me, trying to say he was going to beat me up if I didn't give him a piece of gum. So
You fucking deserved it. That's
yeah,
fine.
that led to a lengthy suspension and hospital bills for the other kid that my parents had to pay. So I never lived that one down. So
It happens. So after high school, what road did you go down?
So I got really big into going to conventions a lot. I got big into like collecting autographs and things of that nature. And my who's now my brother-in-law, his brother was a very big wrestling fan going to conventions. So I used to go with him and another gentleman that was a friend of his. He's an old school name. His name was Brett Schwann. And he had like one of the early wrestling hotlines locally called the Wrestling Clothesline that became a small website when AOL was around back in the day. But he used to go to all the indie shows that ECW guys used to be on because they were allowed to do those shows back then. And through that, I got to know some guys and would go to conventions, and I'd meet different people. And then I'd start going to some indie shows. So, 96, 97. Jersey All Pro when they were getting really big and they were running a charity hall in Bayonne, which is kind of funny because I remember the 3 guys that scared the living shit out of me were Homicide, Moff, and Mac, just throwing guys throwing guys in the walls, and just that was pretty cool. But then I would go to other local indie shows, and there was a company by the name of New Jack City Wrestling that was run by a guy named AJ Sparks, who was a local promoter. And I just started asking around because I had seen that there were some schools around but didn't know how to get in. And I remember asking AJ Sparks, he said, yeah, talk to a guy named Kevin Knight. He's a local guy at the time, only been in the business about 3 years.
So IWF?
IWF, yeah. So that's when he and Kevin Knight started the IWF promotion, and they opened up a school in '99. So now this is 2001. They had a 1-day fantasy camp that I heard, and they said that the person who did the best would be offered free training. And I think guys who grow up loving pro wrestling and wanting to get into it, you may not know how to hit the ropes or take a bump, but if you've watched wrestling enough, I think it kind of ingrains in your head. You start to have an idea. Yeah. And there was probably about 20, maybe 25 guys at this camp, and I thought I did pretty darn well. I got in the ring, I took my first bump, and it was like a drug. I wanted more. There's some guys who take their first bump, and they're like, I do not want to be on this side of the ring. Right. And unfortunately, I didn't win. I came in second, but AJ said, you did really well. I can't offer you the free training. We advertise it, but I'll give it to you for half. And I said, sign me up. And that was where the road started. First day I walked into training was Simon Diamond and Dawn Marie, because Dawn Marie at the time was getting signed by WWE, so she needed the in-ring training. And then Kevin Knight was the head trainer, Biggie Biggs, and just because they lived, down the Jersey Shore, Balls Mahoney and Chris Candido used to come up to school all the time. So very early on, I got a lot of that really consistent training from guys like Chris and Balls, who had great fundamentals that came from Smoky Mountain, and all those other areas. And then you have Kevin Knight, who was trained by a lot of really good journeymen in wrestling, like Rick Ratchet and those guys were all in a different league of their own at that Indies in the time, which I wish the Indies would kind of go back to that, because there was a lot of untapped talent at that point that just doesn't exist now. Guys that had great basics and fundamentals. Simon Diamond came from that era. Adam, throwing names out if you guys know these names. Adam Flash, Flash Wheeler, Flash Flanagan, Nature Boy, Black Nature Boy, Scoot Andrews, Mr. Ooh La La, all those guys that came from that era. Who still wrestles. He's on a bucket list of mine. One day I got to get him in the ring. I don't care if he's 70. Charisma personified. But yeah, that's where a lot of my training, that's how I kind of got my start.
So what was it like being an ECW fan, walking in somewhere like IWF and having guys that you watched that hooked you on the products, guys that you watched in there training and giving you advice or helping you out or just being there along with you, watching you?
Scary, because these are guys I looked up to watching on TV every week. You know, everybody who grew up in the area, you know, you got hooked on the products, which you could not wait till it was 1 a.m. on MSG. You know, if I'd fall asleep, I'd make sure my VCR was set to record. Not that anybody these days knows what a VCR is, but yeah, that was what it was. I mean, it was, you know, and it was cool because then when I got started doing events, and then there would be other indie shows, and it was all over Jersey, and all of a sudden I'm in locker rooms, and here's Tommy Dreamer and Beulah, here's Shane Douglas, here's Raven, here's all these guys that I grew up in. Here I am, this new kid who's just trying to find a corner and not piss anybody off. And it was just very scary, but I always clang to Chris, and I always say when people ask me who trained you, a lot of it was Chris, because he was the one that would take the time after events or at the school. We would all sit till 2, 3 in the morning. It was just that knowledge. He would sit there and talk, and he would always tell you that you're not going to get half the things I'm telling you right now, but one day the light bulb's going to go off and you're going to get it. You'll be in a match, you'll be in a car, and the light will just go off, and you know, that's what I remember since. But again, even guys like Tommy would always take the time to give you advice, and that was a pretty cool deal, because you didn't get that, because the WWE guys were always locked into contracts. They didn't do indies, so
no.
You know, you learn from the guys like Raven, incredible mind for wrestling, you know, one of the best. Tommy, the same thing. So learning that grassroots from guys like them, they were a treat to be around, as scary as they were on TV. And it's funny, there was a tryout seminar that I helped with on Saturday, and I was talking to Pitbull #1, and I remember I'd gone to a few ECW arena shows, and I was telling Gary, I said, when you and #2 walked out, I said, no one would ever think of looking at you the wrong way. You would rip somebody's fucking head off. And that was what it was. They were as believable as it was. So it's kind of cool even now, just being able to talk to somebody like Gary Wolf or even Tommy about that era, because that's really what kind of really did it in for me to say, yeah, I really want to do this.
So what's the difference between those locker rooms back then and the locker rooms now, like the respect level and all that?
The locker rooms back then were a lot more respectful, because there was a lot more legitimate veteran talent in that locker room. You know, I would go in and do those shows, and you'd have Chris Candido on one side, you'd have Hacksaw Jim Duggan on another, you'd have Jimmy Snook on another. And just, I think the level of wrestling was different back then, because the training was different. And I'm not to say that the training is not good now, but you know, I still learned from a very old school way that guys like my trainers were taught, where the respect came from the fact that you didn't get in the ring right away. You had to earn getting in the ring. So I remember at our school, it was practice, you know, if the school was open 4 days a week, you were there 4 days a week. And it was literally, starting off, calisthenics would be 300 jumping jacks, 200 squats, 200 push-ups, jog around the building, come back, do wind sprints up and down the building. You wouldn't even get in the ring for the first hour and a half. So I think that bred a lot of respect, so that when you did get in the ring on these shows and you had the ability to work with or work in front of some of these veterans, you earned their respect right away, because you had the fundamentals and the basics. I think today wrestling locker rooms are a little bit different, because, and I hate saying this, but it's so easy to get into the business now. there's not a lot of legitimate schools anymore as there were back then. I mean, and they're still around. Guys, you know, schools like Monster Factory are still here, but you have these little pop-up schools, and you have guys that are just training in a backyard because it's so easy. Anyone can go into High Spots, buy a ring, go rent a VFW hall for a couple $100, put a curtain on a door, and all of a sudden, oh, I'm a promoter, you know? And that's just, it's unfortunate. And because of that, it's so easy for guys to get into the business now, and it's so hard because the way the indies are set up, everybody wants a shot. So guys are literally willing to work for next to nothing to, you know, become a wrestler, but they're not getting the proper training because they're not going to schools. They don't want to do the work. And like I've always said, if pro wrestling was so easy, there would be a line out the door of every school. But there are guys that find ways into the business and they ruin it for the guys that have earned it, that are legitimate, and want to look like a wrestler. Instead, you have a bunch of guys that are 85 pounds soaking wet. They all wear the same generic gear. And it's not to be mean, it's they were not taught or trained properly. So I think the locker rooms now, I think they're not as professional as they should be. I think a lot of guys treat it like a joke, but I think a lot of it has become a joke because you have a lot of guys that were not brought up in the business to be trained as a promoter properly. So they don't understand match structure. They don't understand what it takes to put an event together. They don't understand that every match builds to a main event. But then because they're booking everybody, because they're nice guys, you have what would normally be a 7 or 8 match card is now becoming 13, 14 matches. They're not being told what to do. So everybody's going out and they're having the same match. Dive here, dive there, off the top here, flipping Hurricane Run into a spine buster. I don't, you know. So that's where I think the locker rooms, unfortunately, are a little different. But that's not to say there aren't great places to go, because there are. There are great places to still go and work. You just have to find a way to weed through a lot of them to find the good ones, because there's just so many bad ones that are popping up everywhere, and it shows. So, but I think that's the difference. There were fewer back then, and there was more respect level. So the promotions then, there was a lot of legitimate ones, as opposed to now where there are still legitimate ones, but unfortunately they're surrounded by so many terrible ones.
You're also a trainer, right?
I'm not necessarily a trainer. I mean, I still love to train in the ring. I still love to get in the ring and train, but I do help out with the Creative Pro New Jersey School. I love getting in the ring with the guys. I love teaching. I love giving back. I'm not a trainer per se for WrestlePro, but I love going there and working with the guys, with Pat Buck, you know, with Dan Moff, Mario Bocara. You have other guys that have been around for a little bit, you know, like Bobby Wayward is always there and helping. Chris Kuehling is there, and I'm there. So, you know, I think it's good to have a mixture of the experience levels for the new guys that are there, and the fact that everybody works a different style. I think everybody brings a little bit to the table. You know, Pat, who was in OVW for a very long time, literally learned every single style. So he knows a little bit of Japanese, or a little bit of European, a little bit of the lucha style. Mario Bocara is a very fine-tuned, you know, fundamentals and basics guy. Dan Moff is all about facials and intensity and aggression. Not that he would know anything about that, but you know, Bobby Wayward's a very technical wizard in the ring, so you have experience there. Ben is a very outlandish character, and I'm kind of in the same plate as a Dan Moff. I'm all about story, facials, intensity, putting things over the right way, structuring things the right way, and just giving you just a different way to look at doing things. So that's, you know, I think that's why I think we have a really good school with Creative Pro and WrestlePro, because there's just so many different variances of experience there. So, so I guess you could fancy me a trainer, but nothing that you would put under my name. I'm not necessarily tied, but WrestlePro is my home. So
now you mentioned Moff in this, and you mentioned Moff earlier on with Jersey All Pro, along with Homicide and Mac. How is your relationship from being terrified of them early on to what it is currently nowadays with them, sharing locker rooms with them?
It's very funny because on the onset, when a lot of people see guys like Dan Moff, he's not a very likable individual. He's a very rough individual around the edges, but a lot of people don't get to see the different side of a Dan Moff. You know, I first met him, he was actually working out at the same gym I did, and I introduced myself to him and told him that we had some mutual friends. And you know, when Moff's in the middle of a workout, that's not the guy to bother. So he wasn't rude, but he kind of shunned me away. And then when I first came to WrestlePro and I introduced myself to him, wasn't necessarily interested either, but then he started to see my work a little bit, and then I think that's where the conversations picked up. He saw that I had good fundamentals and I had some intensity, and then we would talk and found out we had very similar interests in the guys that we studied. And I think that's kind of just what grew a respect level there, and you know, a small friendship that kind of just came along as I got to know him. So a lot of people don't know that there's a different side to a Dan Moff, but he's very straight-laced. He is the guy that will give you the shirt off his back if he likes you, but if he doesn't like you, he won't even pay attention to you. So he's just a really awesome guy to pick his brain from all the experience he's been in. And the same with Steve. When I see Steve, it's the same thing. Always trying to get that experience. Homicide is a guy that I think I mentioned earlier too, is another guy that's been on my bucket list for a long time to really work. But anytime he's in a locker room, I'm always picking his brain because he has such a unique mind for wrestling. For a guy that is very short and small that you would think wouldn't have a chance. And he's been with Impact for, I don't know for how many years now. I think it's
Long time.
a long time. So he's a vet. So, but it's really cool that they look at me in the same light as a peer. And you know, to go back 20 years ago and watch them as a fan is kind of, I don't even know what the right word is, but it's
Surreal?
Yeah, that's probably the right word, is surreal, because I would never think that I would get to a level where I'm at in the ring where I could say, put me in the ring with a guy like Homicide, I know I can hang. That's how I look at it. But it's very humbling to be able to get to know some of these guys and be able to pick their brains and still have them look at me in that same light.
So where did the Messiah of Old School nickname come from?
Actually, I give that credit to Dan Moff. So when you start out in wrestling, no one ever is really who they try to be. You know, I think we all want to get in wrestling. We all develop these characters that we want to be, but once you realize that it's not really you, it's not going to come across. And you know, over the years when I started, I went from just being a generic babyface to a generic heel to trying some outlandish and different things. And you know, I think I was at a point a couple of years ago where I was I was stuck in a rut. Like, I knew I was good in the ring and I knew my fundamentals, but there was just something missing. And I had always worn long tights for pretty much the majority of my career, and it all just came through just joking around, because Moff and Falaba would always make fun of me because of I would always have to match the wrist tape to my gear, and Dan Moff apparently has an obsessive compulsive disorder with electrical tape, which he cannot stand. Like, he won't even laugh about it. I don't know why. It's just the way it is. And you know, he told me to start wearing just straight athletic tape, and I was looking for a change. And Falaba just said, "Why don't you just try trunks?" And I always knew I had pretty built legs, but I think all of us in wrestling or in sports, we're our own worst critic. You know, we don't think we're big enough. And I always, for some reason, I always had strong legs, but never thought that they matched the size of my upper body. So I was always scared to try it. Until I just said, fuck it, one day. We had a fair show for WrestlePro. I went and just got a cheap pair of trunks, and, you know, like all professionals do, you're gonna take that picture in your bedroom and send it to your buddies, hoping that it never ends up on social media.
But it does.
But it does, just like dick pics and things of that nature. We may as well get that elephant out of the room. No, I have never sent dick pics to anyone with the exception of Brian Knobs, which is a very infamous picture that's been floating around for a long time. So it's a dick pic, but it's not of me.
And it's not really a dick pic.
Not really a dick pic
Yeah,
either.
I'll leave that if somebody finds it to zoom in on it, and we go from there. Anyway, and I know all you're thinking right now is Louisville Slugger, so I'll just leave the fans to just figure that one out too. All due respect to Brian Knobs and the Nasty Boys, 100%. So anyway, back to the question. So it was just a long process. I tried it, and the trunks looked really good on me, and I went from a couple of iterations, and again, just being a fan of old school wrestling, and that's the style that I've always worked. I've never been flexible enough to do flips or dives or anything like that. So I always knew I had that like old school, like bruiser, barrel-chested body, and just talking to different people, the gimmick just came to be being like the anti of today's wrestling. Because I still believe that old school character of wrestling will work, because all the young guys coming up in wrestling today, they're emulating the guys they grew up on, which is the guys like Rey Mysterio, and that mid-2000s, end of the Attitude Era into that next step of the high flying and me growing up on that old school NWA, WWF, and then really when I started studying wrestling, the World Class Championship Wrestling, and then even the international stuff with All Japan and New Japan, that I just believed that there was a way to incorporate that old school style of wrestling with today's style. I mean, I can't do those moves, but I can take them. So I think it's just figuring out that structure, but also having a belief in what I still believe in wrestling can add to that character. So a lot of times when I'm cutting promos, what I say just comes out because it's very real to me. And my buddies would always joke around about stupid things about me. They would call me, I have a habit of being on my phone a lot. And you're the messiah of social media, and you're the messiah of your phone, and you're the messiah of I can't drive, and everything is just, it's a fucking rib on me. I'm the one that gets ribbed the worst out of everybody in my group. And literally, Mob said one day, he goes, you love old school wrestling. He goes, we just be the messiah of old school. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let me try and run with it. And I just, the more I believed in it, because, I studied so many different avenues for wrestling. When somebody says, for example, when he said to try that, I literally went in the dictionary and I literally read word verbatim what Messiah stands for. And I'm just thinking, okay, let me get involved in this a little bit more and let me have some fun with this. And, sometimes when I hear something and it clicks in my brain and I joke around, oh, this is a tweet. Maybe I'll put this post up. And just sometimes that would come out, and then, guys would say, oh man, you gotta stop being bitter. You gotta stop being so angry. And it's not that I am, it's just I get very passionate when I talk about things. So then as I realize, okay, I'm gonna take that and that and that, and that's where this is really starting to cultivate itself as a character, and it's really starting to come out in my work, and trying to still add a little bit of level of authenticity to my promos of stuff that is going on today in wrestling. For example, I hate kick pads. I don't care if you wear them, just to me, they don't make sense to me. Why would you wear kick pads? Half the guys who wear them don't even throw kicks.
Right.
So those are some of the things I will just throw out as a character, and you're gonna get people again, why are you so bitter? Or people don't realize it's a character. But if you're buying into it, then that means I've struck a nerve with you. So I'm gonna keep going.
Out of our group, I'm probably the biggest mark by far. And I completely remember the day I was like, I really am a Shawn Donavan fan, was Modern Vintage, the first time we went. you came out with like a cup of tea
Espresso.
with an espresso, and I was like, I don't know what's about to happen, but I'm already in. And you just went off on like everyone in the audience. There was one lady who got it the worst, and I sat there thinking like, I can't believe he just said that, but holy shit, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And like she was just like.
Yeah, you know what it is, and that's where I try to add some of that. I mean, I try to just freestyle. I don't really think of my promos. I've been somebody that goes very off the cuff, and I just want to have fun. And I love coffee. Like that's a big thing. I love coffee, and literally inside. I mean, this is a show where it's like a flea market, I think, right? So
there's a farmer's market.
Farmer's market. There's a restaurant on one end, and you guys selling license plates on the other, and little tchotchkes, and then there's a little espresso shop. So I'm like, oh, I want to get a cup of coffee. I think they're going to put in one of those little plastic things. So I walk in there. I'm already in gear, so I'm walking through this farmer's market in trunks. You know, half my ass is sticking out, my shirt's tucked in. And the guy literally hands me a cup of espresso in a nice, like, ceramic little glass. And I took a sip of it, and I'm just thinking, I have a promo tonight. Fuck. I look at the cup, I'm like, I'm coming out with the fucking cup of espresso. I walked to the back, and I think we were matched like 6, and I went to get it, and it was early on. I literally found a little corner to put that espresso cup in to make sure it would not fall. So I think, okay, I'm just gonna be Mr. Eloquent and cut a promo with my cup of espresso. I stuck the pinky out like the Europeans do. And I don't know what it is about crowds when just somebody I hear that is a heel, you suck. It like flips a switch, and all of a sudden just things you probably just shouldn't say to people. I have no filter. It just comes right out. I think I said something to the effect, I called the woman, I don't remember, I called her a beached whale or
Yeah, beach whale.
beached whale. And then there was a guy in the crowd who was wearing a Philadelphia Eagles jacket. I think I just found a way to rip on the Philadelphia Eagles. You know what it is? I don't know. I have a very, I'm very quick on my feet when it comes to rebuttals or things of that nature. But I just try to have fun. I'm not really looking to insult somebody. But if I'm getting a reaction from somebody, that's only going to add more onto the match. And, you know, obviously if I'm giving a time limit, that's cool because I asked the promoter, is like, you know, he goes, no, just, he goes, I've seen your promos where he goes, just go have fun. If they're reacting, just keep going. And literally every side of the ring I turn to, there's just content right in front of me. It's just, you can't make it up. I mean, when I see a woman just sitting there and there are things going through my mind of thinking, are we allowed to say certain things on here?
Absolutely.
You can say
I
whatever
mean,
you
I'm
want.
sorry. I just, when your stomach is bigger than your chest, not that there's nothing wrong with big women. Everybody, there's somebody out there for everybody. Just, I easily go into like statistics. And there's some of my promos that I've cut before that I've, you know, I think we were at a show at Wrestle Pro and we were in Brooklyn and they have a bar area where they sell, you know, the hot dogs, hamburgers, and beer. And, you know, I think I just said, hey, let's give it up for the St. Patrick's Kitchen. And everybody just went nuts. Hey, let's clap. And I said, thank you all for reacting. I said, because you're all the same people that's buying all that greasy food that is making every single one of you pigs a statistic in this country. But that's just me flying off the cuff because, again, this is just me as thinking, right? The one thing that everybody hates to hear is the truth about themselves. And that gets under people's skin. I don't want to hear the truth about myself because it pisses me off. So if it pisses me off, I think it's going to piss somebody else off. And I think that's just where it comes out. And sometimes, yeah, things shouldn't be said. You know, I've said a few things at a fair show that caused a few complaints that I know I had to kind of take a step back on. And I totally understand that. Maybe wrong place, wrong crowd. And understand because I don't want to get shows shut down and things of that nature. But, you know, I think that's just where it comes from. A lot of the character and me being very vocal comes from having a lot of doors slammed in my face. So yeah, it's just, I think that's where it comes from. I've had a lot of doors professionally slammed in my face from wrestling. I have a lot of doors slammed in my face in life. I've gone through a lot of different things in my life that I think I've been able to take from each of those pieces and now bring it to the forefront to say, okay, I've had X amount of years in the sport now. I don't have anything to hold back on at this point. Just go for it. Who cares? Because I think in this day and age with the way social media is, like I think I said earlier, somebody's going to have a problem with something. And at the end of the day, if you're not being true to yourself and your opinion, and you're always worried about somebody else, you got to look out for number one at some point and just be you. Because you're going to have 10 people that like it and one person that doesn't. Well, I'm sorry if the one person doesn't like it. That's my view and my opinion. It's the way it is. So
now talking about lines being crossed in wrestling and everything, being an ECW fan, one of the infamous angles in ECW was the crucifixion angle with Raven and Sandman.
Yep.
Do you believe in wrestling there are lines that cannot be crossed, or do you believe that in wrestling everything is kind of fair game?
That's a good question. I think it's 50-50. I think you have to know your audience. You know, if you're at I guess use the example, right? If you're at a kid-friendly show, the last thing you want to do is have a barbed wire death match. You know what I mean? I think that is crossing the line because you're in front of impressionable young children, and they just want to see characters. They don't want to see two guys go out there and, you know, in 2 punches, it's like Abby just spitting blood out of his forehead everywhere. I think that is crossing because now you're giving the visual to these kids that it's a violent nature, and then they're impressionable, and then they're going to go onto the playground and they're going to punch their buddies in the head. Oh wait, he's not bleeding. Let me punch him some more. You know what I mean? So I definitely think it's 50-50. You have to know your audience. If you're an adult type crowd, then you can get away with doing and saying certain things. But again, I think society has changed a little bit too, or a lot now. I mean, I'm starting to find it very hard where I have to find certain elements how I can still be a heel, because in 2018, everybody takes what you say the wrong way. I mean, you have to be very careful. We're in a very politically correct environment. So I think, obviously, if anyone tried to do that same crucifixion angle today, forget it. It would be all over worldwide news. 20 years ago, I think it was, right? 22 years ago, 96?
Yeah.
It was accepted back then. And even then, I remember watching that on TV as a fan, and I'm like, holy shit. I'd never said that. I wasn't, and obviously, you know, you've heard the stories of Kurt Angle being there, and he said, I'll never work for this company, and he found it very offensive. I think at that point, I'm dating myself, I think I was like 16 or 17. I'm a young kid, I got my license, I'm living the world. I could really care less who's getting crucified on a barbed wire cross, you know what I mean? But I think looking back at it now today as an adult and saying, yeah, that probably stepped over the line. But I think with anything with wrestling, you have to have the common sense to know who your audience is. Because that's the way, if you're running a business or a promotion, you want to keep fans coming back. Again, I look at my old trainer, Kevin Knight, always catered his shows to young kids, casual fans. That's why he always drew good houses. And you want to appeal to that. So, but then you do have some promotions, like I work for a company called Wrestling Has It Tomorrow in Rhode Island, and it's more of a very passionate independent wrestling fan base where it's more of an adult fan base. So yeah, you can get away with a few different things in there, you know, spots in the ring where a guy is doing a strip tease with, you know, a female because it's an intergender match, but it plays into the story. You can get away with that there because it's that type of audience that understands it and no one's going to get offended. So I think, again, it's just knowing your audience.
What are some of your goals now? Like, I mean, you're not late in your career or anything, but you're like in your 30s already. So what's like where you want to be? Like the highest mountain for you?
I think the highest mountain, I think, is just taking it day by day and see where it goes. I mean, I still have goals. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, everybody wants to get to WWE. If there's wrestlers that say they don't want to get there, I think if it was 10 years ago, you would say it's a lie. Nowadays, with so many doors being opened, with you look at guys like Cody and the Young Bucks creating All In, that literally has changed the game to say that you don't need a machine behind you to run a 10,000 seat arena show. They proved it wrong. So I think for me, it's just seeing what opportunities come about, what doors can open up, and where can I make a name for myself. Whether it be Impact, or if there's an opportunity down the line with a Ring of Honor, or really if it's just if my career is meant to be on the independents. You know, at the end of the day, it's my goal of where I want to go. But would still love the opportunity to travel different places. I would, you know, a goal for me is to still go to Japan. I would love to do at least a tour in Japan at least once, because I love that style. I love that era of wrestling. But I still would love to go wrestle in Germany, where, you know, WXW has been in that grassroots of guys that came out of there for many years. I would love to go to Italy or wrestle somewhere in Europe. But I think for me, my goal now is just I want to have great matches. I have a bucket list of fresh talent that's out there now that's young that I would love to work with. Guys like I mentioned earlier, guys like Homicide that I would love to step in the ring and test my ability with against. So I think for me, those are my goals. I just want to have great matches. I want to just be able to get people to know who Shawn Donavan is as a character. I think I have a lot of different layers, and I think I have a lot to offer, with the hope that someday my wrestling career will continue when my in-ring days are done. So it's not to say I'm basing it on any one company. I just want to knock down doors and see what's available.
Respect that. I was gonna say, well, since it's my turn still, all right. Well, why does everyone always look at me? I'm sorry. So on that same line, like, who are the young guys that you've been helping to train that you like would say is like a future star?
It's kind of hard to say. I don't think I've really necessarily, you know, helped train any one individual that's breaking out, but I love when I see young talent in locker rooms and I get to know them as friends and I see them doing really cool things on the indies. I like to just have conversations with them and just, if I can give any little bit of feedback that I can. I think the first guy that I really gravitated towards that I knew was going to be somebody was MJF. You know, he was training, you know, with the Cap New York group, and obviously the WrestlePro shows being the same owner, same company, we would all mix talent together, and I always just grew a cool friendship with him in a locker room because, like me, he found a different way of approaching that old school style of wrestling combined with what today's indie style is. And I'm a huge fan of him. I mean, I knew the kid was going to go places because we would have conversations, and the kid had drive. I mean, he would drive himself to Ohio, not booked on a show, just to set up chairs, hoping he'd get on. Because that's the old school way that I learned of getting on shows. There was no social media, send a Facebook message to a promoter, hey, I'd like to work your show. You literally had to find these places and drive to them and just help set up chairs. So there's just a plethora of guys that are out there that I'm just so impressed by that I want to get in the ring and just create something with. You know, guys like, again, MJF, guys like Josh Briggs, Ace Romero. There's a really cool cat out in Florida named Barrington Hughes who works for MLW, who's a really, really cool guy. Definitely would love to mix it up with him. So there's a lot of guys that are on my head. I could probably sit here all night and name them. There's just some of the ones that are coming off the top of the head. And then the guys that I work with at WrestlePro, guys like Anthony Bowens is a phenomenal talent. Matt McIntosh, it took 3 years of finally being able to wrestle him one-on-one. And I think we barely scratched the surface of what he and I can do in the ring together and tell a really cool story. So there's lots of guys out there. AR Fox, I mean, you got Casey Navarro, and there's just so many guys that are out there. And I think social media, that's the positive part of wrestling. Social media has been able to bring together guys that you would never thought are out there, and it's giving everybody a chance to be seen now.
I was going to ask you about that too. I mean, I'm going for my master's in social media, but like, how do you feel social media has affected wrestling? I mean, you say it's like positive sometimes, but like at the same time, there's stories that you want to keep in the ring, and then you go outside of the ring, and people's like Twitter tells a completely different story.
There's positives and there's negatives to everything. I think that positive is, yeah, you're bringing wrestling together because now all these companies are now being able to be seen on such a wide level. You know, promotions that are in Canada or in Germany or all across the US that maybe for a certain time were a regional company, and now because of social media, it's growing. Fans want to see these companies. A little company called PWG is now literally become one of the hottest independent companies to work for. You know, some of the other, international companies like Progress was a small, company, and now because of social media, it's grown. So those are the positives. The negatives, unfortunately, is I think the way guys handle their social media. I've never been one to mix my personal life in my social media because I'm my own brand. So everything I do, it's character driven because that's my business. Shawn Donavan is my business. So I want to be able to present that with my character in the best light. And it's not going to bode well for me being this type of a character and then all of a sudden here I am, I'm riding a go-kart at Disneyland. You know what I mean? In some cases, if you can put a character twist on it where it may make sense, yeah. But I think guys today, the negative is they're just not handling their social media correctly. The biggest thing I see is guys thanking their opponents after matches, this long fucking diatribe, and it's like, okay, great, now there's no story. And I think if you use social media correctly, you can still tell stories with your character and be able to draw fans into your promotion or the match you're gonna have at a show. Guys are just too busy worrying about the silly shit and not getting down to using their social media as a business. I mean, if I had a long, drawn out, year-long feud with, Matt McIntosh, and then here I am the 2 days after a best of 7 years, hey, I want to thank Matt McIntosh, such a great proponent. We did some really cool things in the ring. I can't wait to work with him again. You just killed anything you had.
Agreed.
So I think, again, there's positives and negatives to everything, but I've always been one to preach, professionalism should go top to bottom, not just in the way you present yourself, but your social media. What are you doing to advance your character, evolve your character, or get fans to be drawn into your social media based on what you're doing, what matches you're having? Are you promoting the companies that are having the matches? So many guys are doing a lot of that stuff today, and you look at their social media and it's all over the place.
How do you feel promos, like what's their impact on, like actual promo videos, I mean?
They need to happen more. Guys aren't doing promo videos at all anymore. Certain companies are, and there are, again, the great companies that are doing that have great minds working for them, they're doing those promos. But if you're a young wrestler, or even a wrestler being in the business 10 years, if you're not trying to hype your match or hype the promotion, and you're not doing your part to try and draw fans into a show, if I'm a promoter and I would like to have you on my event, and you barely share a match graphic, or you barely talk about the event you're gonna be on, or if you're not, again, no one says it's gotta be a long diatribe, cut a 30-second promo hyping the match in the place you're gonna be at. And I think the more people see who you are as a character, they might be more drawn into the performer. And I don't think there are people that are doing it, I just don't think it's happening enough. You have guys like Smart Mark Sterling, who's a great character. He gets a lot of his stuff over with promos and some of the things that he does that he calls the teacher's classroom. And he's found a way to get that on there. So I think if guys are trying to find unique and different ways to brand their character, it's only gonna get them booked more places, grow their name even more. So I don't think as a whole everyone's using social media enough in the right way.
Now, speaking of downfalls on the wrestler side, how about downfalls on the company side? What do you think are some indie show, indie company downfalls?
I think it's the same thing there. It's not using the tools that are available to you. You have things like Twitter, where I see certain companies are literally putting out tweets like once every hour. They're hyping up new guys that they are bringing into their brand. They are throwing out compelling tweets around what talent do you want to see on our events? What are your dream matches? To really try to build, and hey, maybe this company can have that if enough fans want to see that. Not branding their company the right way from a look standpoint. So for example, if you're going to have a show poster, it should look amazing. That poster should want to help draw people to the event, not some guy that sat there using Microsoft Paint. And I'm just being honest. I mean, when I look at it too, it's like if I'm going to be on someone's show and I'm seeing a really bad looking poster, to be very honest, I'd almost be ashamed to be on that show. Agreed. So that's just the long and short of it. I'm being honest.
No, we're looking at the camera for.
Yeah, it's just
calling someone out purposes.
But no, I think they're not promoting their brands in so many different ways. They're not using social media enough, doing promos, hype videos, packages. And again, no one says you have to have top of the line quality editing equipment to do all that stuff. You can do everything with specific apps for an iPhone, and you can do it just on there. I've been toying a lot with my stuff with clips of shows with iMovie, little small editing suites that like Fonto to create graphics, and there's a way to do it. But a lot of companies, again, it's the same thing. They're not using social media to its full potential, but I'll take it a step back further. You can't just rely on social media to get your company's name out there. And so many people think that's the only way to do it. You have to get out and you have to pound the pavement to the local towns that are surrounding your shows, and you've got to poster them. That's the old school way of, I always called it the Dapper Johnny and Gino Moore method of when I came up, they literally had a market for South Jersey when they ran NWA New Jersey that became NWS, but they were old school carny guys. They would go out into the towns and they would flyer local businesses. They would pair with local businesses to sell tickets and give that pizzeria a small cut of those tickets. And next thing you know, they're selling out Sayreville High School with 500 people there, and the only name on the show is the Patriot. Meanwhile, you have shows now with great indie talent that unfortunately can't draw more than 100 people because people are just relying on that social media aspect. They're not getting out there and pounding the pavement. So I think that's another piece that kind of adds to that, not necessarily social media, but if you own a business, you owe it to yourself to get the biggest return on investment. You have to go balls to the wall and do everything you can to promote that brand in whatever show you have. If you're not, and you run that show and your show draws, 80 people, it wasn't bad. When you know damn well you could have drawn 200, 300, 400 people. You just didn't put enough effort into it, so.
I was gonna say, top 3 favorite guys to work.
Wow. That I have worked or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my old tag team partner, still to this day, Michael Blake, who was Travis Blake, is still one of my favorite guys. He's not wrestling any longer, but was one of my favorite opponents. Like I must have had like over, I want to say 30 matches with him. Trying to think who else. I've worked so many different people now. It's hard to really say because there's just so much talent. I don't think I've worked as many guys as I would like to, just because there's so many different new talents that are out there. So, that's tough. I haven't had as like a series of matches with one guy that I can really pinpoint. There are guys that I've had 1 or 2 matches that I definitely want to continue working. Guys like Anthony Bowens, guys again, I've worked Dan Moff twice. I would love to keep working him again. Great talent in the ring. Matt McIntosh, I want to do more with. I've wrestled KC a couple times. I want to do more with him. So it's just right place, right time, right promotion.
How did the Dear Good Friend start?
So one half of the Heavenly Bodies, Justin Carino, a gigolo Justin. I'm sorry, I have to call him a gigolo because that's his gimmick. So he is notorious for believing his own bullshit. And I say that with all the love in the world. He would always say, oh, this is my dear good friend. And if you remember Gene Okerlund in his promos, when he would call a guy in, he would say, oh, this is my dear, close, long-time personal friend. And Justin would say, oh, this is my dear friend. And the only way he was his dear friend if it was a name or a legend that he was able to talk to them, he'd always find a way to get their phone number. So a bunch of us would joke, and I would always, rib on him, and I would say, they're not a dear friend of yours unless you have their phone number. It doesn't work that way. Not Facebook, but you have to have the phone number. And then jokingly from there, I said to him, I was gonna buy him a T-shirt. I was gonna get made that had a phone number, like a phone keypad on the front. On the back, it says, "Dear close, long time personal friend." And somehow it just evolved into "Dear good friend," and it's one of those little things you just kind of just can't make up. It's a little thing that happens. So, that's how it was. Then I would joke with him if I had ran into someone and met someone, and they gave me their number. If somebody needed to be picked up for an airport, the promoter would pass their number to me to send him a message saying, "Hey, I'm at the airport." So I would text him, "Hey, look who's my new dear good friend." And then he'd try to one-up me with somebody else, and then somebody else, and that's just kind of how Dear Good Friend started. So it was really more of just a fun rib of a group of guys that are just, pretty tight.
That's good. It's a good name to come up with. I mean, I like that.
It's something fun. We still want to run with it, and we want to do like some 8-mans and 10-mans. It's just a matter of, again, right place, right time.
Great
right
T-shirts too.
Yeah, something fun that a guy who's done a lot for a lot of different places, a guy named Extra Cooler, who's starting to grow his name a lot through some different social media sites, and he's drawn a lot of old school WWF guys or new school people as Hasbro figures. And another buddy of ours, Chris Payne, got the idea. He's like, "Oh, we should all get ourselves drawn as Hasbro figures. This guy can do them." And so, we hit up the guy, and that's just kind of how the little idea came to be. And the guy would ask us, "Well, what Hasbro figure do you want to be modeled after?" So I'm going through all the pictures of all the old cards and all the guys. Like, "Yeah, I want this guy." So that's kind of how it came to be. So something kind of fun. Everyone seems to have like their own little group in wrestling. So hey, if we can do that and maybe make a splash there, that adds into our repertoire.
Now, speaking of nicknames, you mentioned Dipsy. Where did that come from?
Again, I give the heavenly bodies credit to this. So people think, "Oh, dips, he must dip," and I do not smoke. I don't chew tobacco or anything like that. So we were all hanging out one time outside of the gym, and we're just taking a picture or whatever, and I don't remember the exact piece of it, but Mark Carino, the other heavenly body, he held up a skull can, and he just, he said, "Oh, I want a dip," and then because my last name is Donovan, he's like, "Oh," he just said it without saying, "Oh, he's Dipsy Donovan," and they just started calling me Dipsy, and then it evolved into Dips, and to a point where like it was just us calling it. All of a sudden now, anybody that I know, like literally my name in WrestlePro is not even Donovan. Everybody calls me Dips. If you see the lineup on the back of the race board in the back, it'll always, for example, the show we had at Rahway last week, 2 weeks ago, and it was the Wildcat match, and it was Jay Spade versus Dips versus Matt Lancey versus Buster Jackson. So anytime there's a show, it's always Dips or Dipsy's written on there. So it's like my given name now. So it's like my birthright basically. So I guess if I ever have a kid, his first or middle name is gonna be in Dips or Dipsy.
We're getting a no back there.
So, but yeah, that's kind of just how it can be, and just little things that we call. So for example, Fala's a panda. We just call him Panda. So that's the way it is. Gigolo, we just call him Gigolo. That's it. So
how about on the flip side of people to work with? How about bottom three people that you cannot stand working with?
That's hard to say because I want to work with everybody, even the greenest guy in the world. I would love to work because I think if I am a true pro in the ring, I can take someone who is very green and I can make them look like they've been wrestling for a number of years. So the only thing I will say is I don't like working with guys who don't wash their gear and they don't have correct hygiene. And they're the guys that it'll be a nice fresh locker room. And when that guy walks in, you would think that there's been a dead body in there for like the last 5 years, just rotting away. like that's just the type of. I mean, but that's again, that's professionalism. Before I go out to the ring, I have like a little bottle of cologne in my bag. I always spray because I want to be a pro in there. I want to smell good. But then you have these guys that get in there and, man, they put you in a headlock and you're wrenched between their armpit. And it's like, ugh, I'm gonna throw up any minute.
Who are some people that?
No names? You got any names?
Nah, you know what? I'm not the type of guy that's gonna throw out those names. Maybe when cameras are off the air, but I think but again, it just screams volume of that level. You know, you got to be a pro in the ring. So, but I want to wrestle everybody, even if I've seen a guy that is not very good and they want me to work him. To me, that's a challenge to go in there and try to make that guy look as good as he can possibly look, and then talk afterwards. What went right, what went wrong. I think everything's a learning experience. I'm going to get better working somebody that's young like that because I'm going to learn new and different things on how to approach those type of matches later on. That's the other indie term I love when guys use on social media. Big things coming, blessed. Fuck you. Just tell your fucking story. And then all of a sudden the big news, I wrestled a dark match for Ring of Honor. Dude, I can't stand it. Sorry, it just came to say. But no, but it's just to say that I've been blessed that I've never had like a really, really harmful rib plate on me is a good thing. But just fun little things of so driving to a show one day and I was going by myself. I actually got back from my honeymoon. And I was going to help out with a show, and I didn't tell some of my buddies I was actually going to be there. I was going to kind of surprise them. I'm driving down Parkway, and of course, of everything, I end up passing by them. And all of a sudden, my phone is like, "Hey, Dips, you going to that show in PA tonight?" "No, I'm home, guys. I don't know what you're talking about." And they knew it was me. And all of a sudden, I am, I'm driving, whatever, and I'm just jamming the music, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I hear say, "Look to your right." Or I'm sorry, look to your left, because I'm in the driver's side. Look to my left. There are 4 giant bare asses mooning me. One being Falaba, and the other being the big deal Craig Steele.
How'd the other 3 fit?
A
lot of ass.
They were young kids that were riding with them, so they got smart. Get the rookies to drive you.
Were they minors?
No, thank God.
Just gotta make sure.
Yeah, I know. So, but yeah, those are always the fun road stories. Unfortunately, me, I'm the asshole ribber of things. Like, if I know you don't like something, I will hammer it into you, just to the nth degree. Justin Carino does not like peanut butter. I will eat peanut butter, and then I will go and talk to him and say, "Yo, did you see that match?" And he's, guys on shows, urinating in a Gatorade bottle and pretending that you put it next to, "Oh, you want my bottle of Gatorade?" Because it looks like the same color. So you go to lift it up and it's warm, and all of a sudden it just, falls down. I'm usually one that's good for stealing people's gear and wearing it. Craig Steele, who takes his gear way too seriously, of course, my gear is always his hashtag. So we were at a show in Keyport, and he's out in selling, his merchandise. He sells the most insane amount of merchandise I have ever seen. I mean, he brings in like $500 per year. So I literally, I said to one of the guys, "I got an idea." So I took his MVP suit that he wears, the one piece, and I just put it on, and it's a new one he's debuting, and I literally just walk up, and he doesn't even realize it. I just go and sit right next to him, like, "So you sell a lot of merch?" And he goes, "What the fuck are you doing? Take that off. No one's supposed to see that." I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Just go take that shit off." So I just went and I did an entire lap around the building. He's incensed at the table. He wants to chase after me. So I like pulling little stuff like that. I like being the jerk off. But actually the best rib that was played on me was actually yesterday. But it was a rib that went too far. So we stop off at a rest stop, and I'm at a urinal, and I'm, getting ready to pull it out. And all of a sudden, here comes Fala Bob barreling behind me, and he Vader bombs me. I go head and mouth first into the wall. I don't remember anything until I'm in a hallway 5 minutes later yelling at him.
I think I saw this on his story on Instagram.
Yes. And then I look in the mirror, and my one tooth is now chipped. Thank you.
Oh, that was what the post was about.
And then all of a sudden in the comments, the comment he has, he goes, boot hair dryer. So I respond, is that a spot? So is that like Duck One big boot hair dryer? Because apparently I had a state of where I kind of like did not know what was going on. Apparently I was delivering big boots to one of those hand dryers going nuts and wanting to fight Falaba, and I have no idea what's going on. So, and then of course I've got, Justin Carino telling me now he's saying, oh, you didn't do it right the first time, so when you did it the second time, you gave it a leg slap. I'm like, I can kill you all.
Well,
So
I think the post today was like we all got chips on our shoulders except one guy.
that's the whole point. So now it's just become a rib. So maybe I'll just become this. And then they started calling me. They're like, oh, well, I'm just gonna start calling you the Toothless Wonder or Toothless Aggression now. Is it okay to take that? I mean, you do want to take from guys that are no longer around. I mean, is it okay to take that or?
I would say so.
Okay, cool. I'm not gonna get associated with tying my wife up and putting her in a cupboard and.
I mean, I hope not.
Is it too soon? Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, what's it been? 2007, so it's 11 years now.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I think you're good.
Yeah, we're good, right?
You're in the clear.
Okay, cool. Beautiful. But yes, I mean that's a great rib in itself right there. So Falaba, thank you and fuck you.
So is the new name going to be Chip instead of Dipsy?
Oh, wow.
Chipsy
Gypsy
or Chippy Dips.
made it himself.
There we go. I'm gonna start collaborating this. And so again, I'll just take it a step further. One of the reasons why some of the guys don't like to rib me is because I will find a way to make it work as something. So, some of the guys would always hate on me for wearing Pumas, and that's the old man style of doing things or whatnot. So there was one rib that I don't remember exactly. They were making fun of me about something, so I went to a cartoon artist and I had him draw me as that. So they called me, what was that Hanna-Barbera character?
Pink Panther?
No, it was a different. Why it's blanking me right now? Damn. So I don't want to take those tests, but whatever it was. So I ended up having the cartoon artist draw me in my gear as that. And they're like, oh, we can't even friggin' rib you because you find a way to turn it into merchandise and it sells. So, again, I always have to be quick on my feet. You're not going to get a one-up on me if I won't let you. So, but yeah, just those are the funny, good road stories and ribs because at the end we're having fun, And again, you think of just something funny. Last night driving back from that show, we stopped and get gas. You know those giant vans that house 50 immigrants?
Yeah.
When they're trying to go from across the border?
Yeah.
Literally 5 of these things pile into this rest stop, and literally they open a door and there's 100 Asians. Get out of there.
Like an Asian clown car?
Yeah, and all of a sudden we're like, oh God, we lost Moff. He's walking over to them and he's trying to have a conversation. He's all of a sudden, he is now spitting out Japanese wrestler names. He's going, Baba, Suzuki, Nakamura, and they're like, and he's just walking up, and I'm like, what are you doing? We're gonna get arrested. Now we're,
He was trying to get an autograph, honestly.
yeah, and then he's trying to make his way in the van. And I'm like, great, what am I gonna tell your wife? Oh, where's Danny? He's on a car ride to Mexico right now. We've lost him for good.
Oops.
Yep.
So who are some of the people you normally ride with?
Pretty much the entire Dear Good Friends. So, the Heavenly Bodies, Falaba, Dan Moff, Sometimes Anthony Bowens, sometimes Craig Steele. Once in a while, guys like Bear Bronson if we're going up to the same place. But that's usually that's my main crew we always ride with. You throw in some of the other guys that are all pretty close in the Wrestle Prairie, like Nikos Rikos, and anytime you can get some of the newer guys in the car, because again, that's a good way to pay dues and get a free ride is make the new guys drive. There's no guarantee of a spot on the show, but you get some experience in networking. That's what it should be about.
Right.
And that way none of us have to drive.
Absolutely.
Now, recently you were going off in, I think Fala got it in his story. You were going off on something, talking about how you were angry at something. Mm-hmm. What were you angry at?
Basically, basically these guys on a show that defied what the promoter asked them for, and they decided to go into business for themselves, and you know, and they bullshitted, you know, certain guys to their face, and you know, now it's like all of a sudden it's, you know, starting a little bit of a rift between those guys and the experienced guys in a locker room that may not end up very well.
Should be fun to see.
Huh?
Should be fun to see.
Yeah, again, I always take professionalism in locker room etiquette very seriously. So when you see guys that go in there and they defy what a promoter is asking you to do, the promoter's basically your boss for the night. And you may not like who you're working, or you may not like what they're asking you to do, but at the end of the day, if they're the ones that are paying you, you do what they ask you to do and find it in your own way, in your own character, to get that across in front of a live audience. Why guys go and do that, it hurts the business overall.
Recently, or somewhat recently, you made your debut on Impact.
Yes, sir.
For that was the Melrose show.
Melrose Ballroom. Yeah, it was the Bound for Glory tapings.
So what was that like walking through the curtain for something like Impact?
A lot of different emotions. Very humbling because you know, I've had a couple of dark batches, you know, back when I was doing a lot of more WWE work back in the day, but haven't had the opportunity to be in front of a live TV audience platform like that after all the years I've been doing it. So when the opportunity came, I don't think it really hit me until after the match, you know, because even though it's taped for their Explosion show that is seen in other countries, you know, I didn't really grasp a lot of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think the amount of years that I've had an experience that I'm very confident in myself and my ability in the ring, like I think I said earlier, you just got to go for it, you know. And I think I was very happy with the performance that I gave. I got a lot of great feedback from those that were in charge. And at the end of the day, you know, you're like I said, you're the master of your own destiny. You're either going to go out there and you're going to shit the bed, or you're going to go out there and you're just going to leave it all on the line. And you're going to take all of those things that you've learned over the years, and in the hopes that someone watching that is in a executive position sees that, and may not lead to something now, but might lead to something later on the more you show face or get more of an opportunity. I think that's what everybody has to do. Just go out there and leave it all on the line. And if you don't walk back through that curtain saying, I didn't leave it all on the line out there, then you didn't give everything you should have. You know, and I'm one that's very big on emotional and storytelling. I think to a point where even when I got back to the locker room, I actually had to take a step outside. Because when I think back of all the things that I've tried to make my way into in wrestling and having all those doors slammed in my face just to get that one opportunity, if I never get anything again, I have something that now says, hey, if I have kids someday that says, hey, I had an opportunity. It may not have come to fruition, but I got something that there's a lot of other guys that have tried to come through the sport that have never been able to be given a break like that. You know, it's something I can hang my hat on and say, I got that opportunity. And whether I was originally booked for it or not, the opportunity fell in my lap, and I owed it to myself to go out there and represent the people that gave me that opportunity and do it right by them, but to do it right by myself.
Nice. The WWE dark matches. How many did you have?
I had one And then I did some security pieces. I had wrestled a dark match for a guy that was in the, he was from the New England area. If you remember, there was a small tag team called the Dicks many years ago. It was Chad Wicks and I forgot the other gentleman's name, but I was able to go out there and have a quick 4-minute, dark match with him at Nassau Coliseum. And then that led to getting booked for a couple of vignettes back when Big Vito was doing the dress gimmick. And actually myself and Darren Young, Fred Rosser were asked to do that, and it's kind of a funny piece. They filmed this at Gleason's, the home of the shittiest trained wrestlers in the world. Sorry.
That's where I trained back in the day.
I'm sorry. I can give you the name and number of a guy by the name of Pat Buck. He might be able to take care of you. Help that training go along a little well.
No, it's long gone now.
So they brought a bunch of guys in basically because Vito was a legitimate boxer. And they basically had everybody in their wrestling gear, and they put gloves on you, and you were basically gonna spar or get hit by Vito. And I had never boxed before in my life, and they're like, "Oh yeah, just keep your hands up, be a boxer." And a few guys that went beforehand, I guess Vito was getting a little frisky, and he was taking some pretty rough shots on guys. And it's funny because I rode there with Fred, and so they're filming, hey, action, the bell rings, and all of a sudden I hear was, "Keep your hands." Next thing I wake up like 10 minutes later, I'm out. I got knocked the fuck out by Vito in one punch. So we're getting ready to leave, and Fred's like, "Oh, you want me to drive? I can drive." "No, I'm fine." Go to put the car in reverse, except I put it in drive. And I hit the fucking post right in front of me.
Oh, Jesus.
So I had a mild concussion, and Fred said, "No, I'll drive." I said, "Okay, cool." So yeah, they kind of spurred and led to a couple of different fun opportunities over the years.
So now Vito was a Gleason's guy,
I think so. Yeah, I think he originally was a Gleason's guy.
along with Dreamer.
Dreamer,
Taz?
a number of guys, Devon, yeah, all Gleason's guys. Back when the training was legitimate.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. The training was legitimate then, not now.
No, it's a very different world now.
Yes.
Back, I guess Johnny actually got in the ring, and other old school guys got in the ring. When I was there, it was with Matt Stryker.
Yep.
And Tim Arson, Ricky
Yeah.
Vega.
I think that's an unfortunate part that happens in schools a lot now, where you have the veterans that are owning the schools, but they're not actually getting in the ring, and they're just sitting in the office collecting the money, and they're letting guys that they train for 6 months train their classes, and that's where you look at a lot of guys, again, they come out of these schools, when somebody says, "Oh, I came out of this school," "Oh, you must be really good," and then all of a sudden they're the shits because you found out that the actual trainer never actually trained the guys. He was just, using the name and taking their money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Something tells me you know a little thing or two about that.
No, that's kind of what it felt like when I did it. It felt like it was just pay me and then get in the ring and
let me extend your training a little bit. You need to learn a little bit more, so you keep giving me that extra rent money that I need.
It was $3,000 up front, and then you had to pay the gym membership every month. It was $100 a month.
Yep.
So
that, or you would pay the $15 or $2,000 to train, and then there's dues once a year as a lump sum. So it's like either you could pay. I remember one trainer had done this where you could pay, like, I think it was like $2,000, and then you would pay $100 every month as your dues. Mm-hmm. But yet, the equipment in the school never got better. Same shitty canvas, same shitty boards.
we trained in a boxing ring. That was not fun to bump on.
No, because that's not meant for it. So, yep.
No, not fun.
Yep.
Anything else?
It's karaoke time.
I believe it is karaoke time.
Awesome. And now the end is near, and so I face
the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I am certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway and more, much more than this. You better fucking sing it. I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few. I've had a lot. But then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and I saw it through without exemption. I planned each chartered course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this. I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I can chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and I spit it out. I faced it all and I stood tall and I did it my way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried. I've had my fill, my share of losing. And now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did it all that. And may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, not me. I did it my way.
What is a man?
What is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the things he truly feels. Oh, I do. And not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way.
Beautiful job. Beautiful
Thank
job.
you.
That was
Very much.
fantastic.
So, social media. Where can your fans find you on social media?
You mean all the people that want to kill me for all the insults I spat at them on shows?
Those two. You're a heel. You enjoy it.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. All make it easy at Shawn Donavan 01. Drop me a message, follow me, hate me, yell at me, I don't care. Send me dick pics if you want. And then you can also find the Dear Good Friends. We have our own Instagram page at Dear Good Friends. But don't send me dick pics that if they're like really like pigeon-sized dicks. At least give me something I can like want to
Something you can
just
bite into.
like no, not bite into, but just a good
Go fuck yourself.
a good shot. So yes. I don't know how we can come back from this except guys in the world of wrestling, please stop sending dick pics. You're ruining the professionalism of this business. Not there really ever was one, but please stop. It's not good. You're making yourself look like an
PSA.
idiot. Yes. A PSA from the Messiah of old school. Stop sending dick pics
To minors.
to minors. Well, stop sending dick pics, period. No girl really wants to see that. It's all hairy and it's all nasty, and some lean to the left, right, they flip over, they look like Gonzo's nose. I don't want to see any of that stuff.
He's right. He's right.
I think. Have we covered it all?
I think we have covered it all. I think it's a beautiful way to close out the show.
It's a beautiful way to send it out. Guys, no more dick pics. And please, no more I'm blessed, I have big things coming. Just say what the fuck you're going to say and stop trying to work everybody. Thank you all. I love you. And I hate you too.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Conversations with the Messiah of Old School, Shawn Donavan. I'm Noel DiMaggio, our big man, Big Frank, and the superstar of the night, Shawn Donavan.
Thank you guys. Pleasure.
Have a good night.